Good evening, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland in Shenzhen, just south of the Tropic of Cancer. Got a great article and podcast for you all today. I know you're going to love it. There is a boatload of there's 2 pictures. There's tons of links. Go to chinarising.puntopress, puntopress.com. Click on the blog tab in the menu, and you'll find the article there. If not, if you're on YouTube, the YouTube channel or the SoundCloud channel, I always put the link in the description with the podcast. Let's get started, boys and girls. Time to get bigger, better, faster, taller, and more informed all around. The title of this podcast is China Not Relevant in Korea? MSM Flunks Journalism 101, as usual. There's a picture. DPRK Chairman Kim Jong-un is on the left, and his Chinese counterpart is Xi Jinping on the right, during their surprise meeting last week in Dalian, China. They obviously have a lot to smile and laugh about. Times are good, the future looks bright, and U.S. President Donald Trump is the catalyst, keeping it interesting and entertaining. Here we go. Sometimes, actually, all the time, when it comes to the West's big lie propaganda mainstream media, the MSM machine, there are headlines that just slap you in the face. One juicy one was recently in the South China Morning Post, insiders abbreviated SCMP. Jack Ma's Alibaba bought it a while back. He promised not to meddle in its editorial decisions, and it is obvious that he has kept his word. The SCMP still cannot write about China's National People's Congress, the NPC, without adding the anti-communist adjective rubber stamp. Another one they love is when mentioning the People's Daily newspaper or the Global Times newspaper, unfailingly tacking on Cold War descriptors like party organ or Communist Party mouthpiece. SCMP loves to call President Xi Jinping a strongman, supremo, and talk about his personality cult, all with its whiff of totalitarian tyranny. In book number 2 of the China trilogy, China Rising, Capitalist Roads, Socialist Destinations, I researched an extensive list of what I call trigger words that Western big lie propaganda uses pathologically and incessantly to guarantee Pavlovian responses of revulsion at the mention of communism, socialism, Mao Zedong, China, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Russia, Kim Jong-un, North Korea, Bashar Assad, Syria, Iran, Ayatollah, Muslims, Islam, Venezuela, Maduro. I'll stop there since the global list of brainwashed targets could fill the rest of this page and then some. George Orwell wrote about doublespeak and newspeak. Sheldon S. Wolin, W-O-L-I-N, penned a very good book that also deals with the big lie called Democracy Incorporated, Managed Democracy and the Specter of Inverted Totalitarianism. Great book. Instead of level-headed, fact and background-filled pieces like this, with useful historical context, the article I saw in SCMP blared, China seeks to stay relevant in Korean Peninsula affairs. Maybe SCMP got some inspiration from Business Insider, since the day before it came out with a similar article entitled, Kim Jong-un met with Xi Jinping in China again as Beijing struggles to remain relevant in Korea talks. Actually, the CIA's journal of record, the New York Times, all the big lie propaganda that's fit to print, got the ball rolling a couple of weeks earlier with China feeling left out, has plenty to worry about in North Korea-U.S. talks. Egad. These headlines are like a big journalistic fist firing out of my computer screen and whacking me hard in the face. Pow! To write an article based on this supposition that China is clueless and ineffectual about Korea can only be blamed on ignorance and or ideology. Given that the Business Insider article quotes the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, which is a well-known deep state storefront, I would say the issue is more about ideological propaganda to make Baba Beijing look weak and floundering. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Western propaganda almost always ignores the context. The Chinese almost always remember it. Over the course of the Korean War 1950 to 1953, 2 million Chinese citizens volunteered to fight against U.S. imperialism and to safeguard North Korea's freedom from Western colonial exploitation and extraction. Volunteered. Think about that. They didn't have to go. They wanted to take it to Uncle Sam. Mao Zedong's eldest son, Mao Anying, was one of those volunteers, and along with 180,000 other Chinese brothers in arms, did not come back home alive. How many Western leaders' children have fought in hard combat, risking life and limb? Mao Zedong's son did, and paid the ultimate price with his life. There were also 260,000 who returned home injured. All told, China had 430,600 total casualties. The Chinese people have never forgotten and will always remember their people's incredible sacrifices for anti-imperialism, communist socialist ideas, and ideals. They also have the satisfaction of knowing that they kicked Uncle Sam's butt in spite of a deck horribly stacked against them. During the war, the United States blatantly used biological warfare on both sides of the North Korean and Chinese border, killing thousands of innocents in villages and hamlets. This is an historical truth that has been viciously suppressed in the West. Since then, grotesque crimes against humanity. The United States carpet-bombed into rubble the entire surface area of North Korea, dropping 26% more bombs and napalm, 635,000 tons, on an area the size of America's Pennsylvania or Europe's Greece, than all the bombs dropped during World War II's entire Pacific theater, 503,000 tons. As a result, Uncle Sam massacred 8 to 9 million Korean civilians, 1/3 of the North's people, along with many Chinese volunteers. The surviving North Koreans lived to tell their stories by digging vast tunnels in their endless mountain ranges that cover DPRK to testify about the U.S.'s genocidal crimes. Unknown to most Westerners and their leaders, China and North Korea signed a mutual defense treaty in 1961. China is obligated to fight with DPRK if another country attacks the North first, as well as the other way for China. They are communist socialist brothers who lost blood and treasure together and have been backstopping each other almost each other for almost 70 years. There are about 500,000 North Koreans who live and work in China. The border is quite porous, and this number stays about the same since in the DPRK, everybody has free housing, free preschool to PhD education, free medical care, and guaranteed full employment, which is not the case for Koreans living north of the Yalu River. Many of those who live and work in China are involved in cross-border trade, entrepreneurs liaising with families and businesses back home to keep goods coming and going. In addition to all these DPRK immigrants, China has 2.5 million more ethnic Korean citizens of its own, all along the border. About 84% of both DPRK's imports and exports are with China across a 1,420-kilometer long border linked by numerous roads and 3 rail lines. As this map shows, Korean culture, there's a really cool map. As this map shows, Korean culture and people are thick north of DPRK's border inside China. In parentheses, all the zones with horizontal striped lines. Western big lie propaganda likes to portray the North as a soulless prison, but in fact its border with China is very porous. There are about 500,000 North Korean immigrants in China, and there is a lot of cross-border travel, trade, and tourism. The different colors represent Korean dialects. The close relationship that China and South Korea have is just as impressive economically, culturally, and otherwise. I will not load up on more stats and history, but a couple of factoids tell us a lot. 55% of all international students in South Korea are from China, over 68,000. Conversely, there are more South Koreans studying in China than any other country, over 70,000. These nearly 140,000 students, fluent in each other's languages and understanding of each other's cultures, are the anchor that will be cementing these two peoples together for future generations. Korean pop culture has millions of young followers in China, and Koreans are big fans of China's traditional culture like literature, cuisine, tea, and art. China has been honing its skills of being uber relevant with its neighbors, with all of its neighbors for 5,000 years now, mostly smaller ones, and many which have been volatile and unstable over the millennia. Yet, in spite of all the evidence laid out in this article, Westerners are working hard to portray Baba Beijing as an ineffectual diplomatic dolt. It defies belief, but that's ideological propaganda for you. In fact, based on China's regional history, it's safe to say that China is the hidden master puppeteer behind the whole Korean détente, north, south, and with Trump. This has been the modus operandi in East Asia for as long as China has existed. One other thing which is manifest, based on many years of observation and research, is that Kim, Xi, and Trump are working very close together behind the scenes. I suspect South Korean President Moon Jae-in is in the mix too, but to a lesser extent. Xi and Kim know that they have their people's support and don't have to worry about deadly deep states threatening to kill them, but Moon has to keep looking over his shoulder. Thus, Xi and Kim are happy to provide the theatrics, suspense, and surprises that Trump loves as a natural-born showman and media maven. They are probably privately enjoying the spectacle playing out in Trump's roller coaster, tweet-infused, 24-hour news cycle, while playing up to his needs to look presidential and historical, but not to the point of violating their country's core interests or their people's safety, security, and well-being. To me, it is crystal clear that Kim, Moon, and Xi want to get the Korean Peninsula plugged into China's visionary 21st century Global Belt and Road Initiative, initialed the BRI, with rail trade and tourism starting in South Korea, across North Korea, and into China, Russia, and onto Europe and back. It goes without saying that Russia is on board too, pun intended. Of course, the West deep state is using every weapon in its evil arsenal of false flags, subversion, sabotage, and illegal sanctions to prevent this Asian win-win cooperation from succeeding, and Baba Beijing understands this. After all, it has had its finger on the region's diplomatic and economic pulse since the time Abraham was wandering around Palestine, lost, hungry, and living under a goatskin tent 2,000 years before the life of Jesus Christ. Indeed, China has always been East Asia's heart, soul, and circulatory system. China is irrelevant in Korea? Ha ha ha! You gotta be kidding! Get a life! And then below, there's I think it's like 18 interviews on television, articles that I have been involved with, or written, or been a guest on shows. Everything you need to know about Korea, but didn't know where to look. It's the real deal, not Western brainwash, and there's all the hyperlinks listed. Please, in your circles, regularly promote this website, this blog, this channel, etc. There's a lot of disinformation out there about China, and, well, anybody who's against the United States and Uranglo-land, and China Rising Radio Sinoland is one of those places where you can really understand how the world works and what the headlines really mean. Thank you all. Jeff J. Brown signing out. This is from Shenzhen. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.